In a matchup with a level playing field, two challengers from the world of ice and fire go head-to-head in an assessment of brawn, brain, and leadership. To celebrate the release of George R.R. Martin's Fire and Blood, our challengers today will be the two men that bookended the Targaryens' 300-year dynasty. The king who lit the fires of conquest versus the prince who saw its bloody end. Let's meet our challengers. Aegon Targaryen I was born on Dragonstone, a place his family had made their home since the doom of Valyria. Even as a young man, he had a fascination with Westeros. Dreaming of a land with no borders and only a single ruler, Aegon sailed to the mainland and constructed Aegon Fort at the mouth of the Blackwater. With the help of his two sister queens and their dragons, Aegon gave the lords of Westeros two options: to swear fealty to their new king, or fight a battle they had no chance of winning. The kingdom surrendered one by one to Aegon's rule in just 2 short years, with one notable exception. After the Dornish killed Aegon's sister Rhaenys, an already bloody war with the region became an even more bitter grudge match. Aegon doubled down on taking Dorne, even if it meant burning it to the ground. But Dorne's retaliation saw the deaths and maiming of his highest-ranking officers, and several close assassination attempts of both himself and Visenya. Eventually, a peace treaty was reached with the region, and with the majority of the continent now under his control, Aegon spent the rest of his life working to secure his family's future legacy, founding King's Landing, the Kingsguard, and even the Iron Throne itself, all of which became salient pieces of the 3-century-long rule of his descendants. While Aegon I was said to be a powerful warrior, by far his greatest strength was both his ability to command and the iron will that drove his conquest. However, while his success in conquering Westeros shaped an entire nation, his ambitions came at the cost of great personal tragedy, and nearly killed his conquest in its infancy. As King Aerys's firstborn, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen was destined from birth to sit the Iron Throne. While he preferred stories and music to fighting, Rhaegar was knighted at just 17 and proved himself in the small handful of tournaments he entered, with people coming from far and wide to see the popular prince. But it was the tournament at Harrenhal where, upon his victory, he named Lyanna Stark the Queen of Love and Beauty. A controversial gesture, considering he was already married to and had fathered heirs with Elia Martell. The next year, Rhaegar disappeared with Lyanna. This, combined with his father's murderous insanity, sparked Robert's rebellion. While Rhaegar spent the majority of the war hiding out with Lyanna in Dorne, after his generals proved no match for Robert's army, Rhaegar took control of the royal forces and chose to meet Robert head-on in the Riverlands. In the end, Rhaegar was slain at the Trident by Robert Baratheon himself, and with the subsequent death of his mother and father, his exiled younger siblings became the last known remnants of a once great house. Rhaegar was said to not only be well-read and studious, but also a talented jouster, winning one of the largest tournaments ever. However, Rhaegar was always one to follow his heart and not his head, his obsessions and lack of forward thinking even becoming his own downfall. So, will Rhaegar prove himself as the prince that was promised? Or is Aegon about to show this harp-playing pretty boy what a real conqueror looks like? Either way, put your ice back in the fridge, because we're only singing songs of fire today, baby. This is the Battle of Dragons. Our first category is physical prowess, measuring strength, reflexes, and stamina to see who would win in a one-on-one fight. Now, for pretty obvious reasons, Aegon's dragon Balerion the Black Dread is not allowed to fight alongside him here. This is strictly a fight with no outside help. I promise to do something with dragons in the future, but for now it's just too stat-breaking. Aegon might not need the help, though. While we don't have any first-hand experience with him in the current books, he's been described repeatedly as having the physique of a powerful warrior. We also know that he would forego plate armor in favor of scale armor. The reason he probably did this is because it would make it easier to maneuver atop his dragon during flight. But it's not a bad choice for the ground either. It's a pretty balanced armor type that the Romans used to use a lot. Although most notable in Aegon's fighting kit is Blackfire, a Valyrian steel bastard sword that would go on to later have its own history. But while Aegon sports an impressive catalog, his actual fighting prowess is a lot harder to nail down. The named list of people he's fought without Balerion is surprisingly short. But putting it to paper, here's what we do know. We know that he was consistently recounted as being strong and tall. We know that he used fairly mobile armor and had a Valyrian steel sword, but his swordsmanship was maybe not quite as practiced as it could have been. And we know that he showed great resilience during his Whirlwind campaign. These numbers might seem a little bit conservative, but going any higher would mean reaching into speculation. Rhaegar's martial life, on the other hand, is a lot more well-known. At the tournament of Harrenhal, he beat legendary warriors Arthur Dayne and Barristan Selmy. And while he lost his fight at the Ruby Ford, he didn't go down easy. He was agile enough to keep pace with Robert and even seriously wound him. With this in mind, though, his choice of armor is a bit of a strange one. Plate armor decorated with extra crap really just hampers his best attribute, which is the reflexes he would have developed as a jouster. So here's what I've come up with. His strength and stamina were never anything to write home about, but we can assume that with his training as a knight, it would have been above average. And his mobility was impressive, but he dodges being a perfect 10 here due to his preferred armor type. Since Rhaegar was said to be such a prodigy, I actually think his numbers could have been on par with two-handed Jaime Lannister. But unlike Jaime, Rhaegar disliked fighting and never put the time into really honing his skills. Comparing him against Aegon, though, they're actually pretty close. If Rhaegar had time to train and wore something a little lighter, he could be able to land an early strike to win. But Aegon would gain more of an advantage the longer the fight went on. Rhaegar might have the speed, but Aegon's discipline and experience would give him the endurance to outlast him. As long as Aegon defended himself through Rhaegar's initial burst of energy, he could use his superior strength to slowly wear him down, making the fight as good as his. Now, my final caveat is that if they were both on horseback, Rhaegar might do a little better with his jousting background to the point where I could call it a tie. But as it stands, the first point goes to Aegon. Next up is mental prowess, measuring intelligence, perception, and mental fortitude. Whose cognitive power is stronger on the ever-shifting chessboard of Westeros? It's easy to conclude that since Aegon conquered Westeros in less than 2 years, he would have had to have been a great strategist, right? Well, there's definitely truth to that, but it really wasn't battle tactics that won Aegon the throne, was it? And this is where it gets squirrely on my end, because it's hard to judge someone's lockpicking ability when they only use a shotgun to open doors. But let's take a look at a situation where Aegon couldn't just outgun his opponent. It's accurate to say that Dorne was Aegon's greatest failure, but it also became his greatest lesson. He eventually made the mature decision to agree to the region's independence, even if it meant not finishing what he set out to do. The attacks on his life pointed out his need for royal bodyguards, and with the creation of the Iron Throne, he imparted this great piece of wisdom to his descendants, that a king should never sit easy. So, stat-wise, where does all of this leave us? Well, probably something like this. A highly ambitious conqueror that struggled when he couldn't take the straightforward approach, but one who grew into a wise king that reflected on where he was weakest, instead of just resting on his strengths. Rhaegar was said to be quite the bookworm as a child. He learned to read at a young age and picked up everything from singing to jousting almost instantly. But working out Rhaegar's stats in this category comes down to one question. Is being talented the same as being smart? Well, let's put a pin in that for a second and talk about Lyanna Stark. Rhaegar's decision to run off with her was short-sighted in every way. Very little thought was given to the personal and political fallout that came afterwards. And moreover, Rhaegar had plenty of chances to come clean with what was going on, but didn't even try to reconcile the situation until it was way past fixing. It's heavily implied that he was obsessed with the Azor Ahai prophecy, and it drove almost everything he did. So maybe later installments will prove that he knew what he was doing the whole time. But no matter how you slice the R+L=J, removing a sword from a lady makes you Jesus, magical destiny, etc., etc., Rhaegar may still be one of the worst judges of character, because you want to know who he knighted? Yep, that's right. Rhaegar knighted Gregor Clegane, the man who would go on to murder his wife and children. Rhaegar may have been accomplished, well-educated, and well-intentioned, but he repeatedly showed bad instincts, nearsightedness, and an obsessive immaturity. At the end of the day, Aegon learned something that Rhaegar never did: when to own your mistakes and walk away. Finally, we have political prowess, measuring the ability to persuade, bribe, and command others to do the heavy lifting and hard thinking for them. History would go on to remember Aegon's conquest as the most important entry in Westerosi history, but cementing his new kingdom was an uphill endeavor. Aegon had to work tirelessly to maintain a good standing with his subjects, and while he was said to be a charismatic diplomat in his own right, several regions jumped at the chance to rebel against the throne the moment his less intimidating son took over. So while he was feared and respected by all, many held the private opinion that he was a vicious tyrant. Likewise, the long battle with Dorne and early establishment of King's Landing's defenses left Aegon reliant on the taxation of regions that weren't doing too well themselves after the war. In terms of influence, though, he was untouchable. No one person had ever commanded this much power before in Westeros. In contrast to Aegon, who had to work hard for moderate acceptance of his new station, people couldn't wait for Prince Rhaegar to become king. In fact, somewhat literally, many wanted to oust his crazy pants father and let him take over early. Rhaegar's popularity was undeniable. Loved by just about everyone, he was the stuff of fairy tales. Good-looking, charismatic, and refined. Not to mention rich. A prior decade of Tywin acting as Hand of the King left the Targaryen royal coffers looking pretty flush at the time. Status-wise, he was a prince that held just as much, if not more, loyalty than King Aerys, and still retained a lot of powerful support after half a realm labeled him a kidnapper. Aegon may have carried more clout, but Rhaegar had the winning personality and the financial perks of being part of an already rooted Targaryen empire. While both Aegon and Rhaegar are fairly close in political and especially physical prowess, the hard advantage Aegon has over Rhaegar is in mental capabilities. Aegon accomplished feats that most could only dream of. Could he have done it without dragons? Probably not, but what sets him apart is how every setback only made him a stronger king and leader. Maybe Rhaegar could have been an amazing king in his own right, but him acting without consideration meant that the realm would never find out. So, with a 2-1 victory, the winner is the dragon that conquered Westeros, Aegon Targaryen I. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share the video if you enjoyed it, and if you'd like to see bigger and more awesome Westeros brawls, and see them more often, please consider becoming a patron. It's my dream to one day get this series voice acted, and even animated. As always, be sure to leave a comment for who you want to see next time on Westeros Brawls.
What am I doing?
You're taking the ice and you're like tossing it into the freezer. Okay, can you do it like more aggressively?
Oh, I don't want everything to go flying.
No, that's what I want. I want it to like flip over. I want it like...
Alright.
Perfect.